Hello, everyone, and welcome to this 30-minute soft skills session. My name is Jack Riley. I'm the sales enablement lead here at Sophos. Presenting today, we have Chris McCormick. He is our czar of XG Firewall. He's going to tell you all about the new remote VPN options with XG Firewall, everything you need to know. On the call, too, we have Alan Toes, who's going to be answering some questions at the end. As usual, this will be recorded, so you'll be able to access that recording at the end of the session. For partners on the partner portal in the webinar section. For our internal folks here, you can grab it right in the Sophos Hub. You'll be on mute throughout the duration of our call, but if you do have questions, and I hope you will, just toss them right in the questions panel, and we will be more than happy to answer those at the end of the session. If you do have technical difficulties throughout, please just shoot me a message on chat. I will see if there's anything I can do to help you out, and if there is, I will. With that, Chris, why don't you take us away?
All right, thanks, Jack, and thanks for everyone taking some time out of your day to attend this session. In this session, we're going to cover the various VPN options that XG Firewall supports, which, as I'm sure you all appreciate, is super important these days. Whether it's remote workers, remote sites, or site-to-site VPN, it's very important. And as Jack mentioned, Alan Toes is with me today. He's the PM for a couple of the products we're going to be talking about. So please enter your questions while we go along. Alan will be jumping on those and answering them as we go. And don't be afraid to ask some good technical questions, see if you can stump them. So as Jack mentioned, if you're new, my name is Chris McCormick, and I am the product marketing manager for our XG Firewall product. So let's get this show on the road. So XG Firewall offers a variety of secure VPN options that really enables remote workers that could be at home or on mobile devices or even remote locations, and even interconnect public cloud infrastructure, all to integrate and connect back to a central Sophos XG Firewall. And there's different tools and technologies that you use to enable these. If you're connecting from your laptop, you'll use a different tool from maybe a remote office versus a mobile device is yet different again. Okay, so what are those various tools? Well, since the launch of XG version 18 earlier this year, the product team has really continued to deliver a few exciting new enhancements, all related to this VPN remote access technology. Well, let's start with the SSL VPN client on the left, or Sophos Connect, which is our free VPN client for Windows and Macs. As you can imagine, it has been super popular lately with many people working from home. In fact, Alan was telling me we have well over 800,000 clients out there connecting back to XG firewalls around the world. And the team has recently released an early access program for version 2 of this Sophos Connect client, which offers SSL VPN support on Windows clients, in addition to the IPsec VPN it supported previously. And then in the middle here, you've probably become aware that we've recently launched some exciting new SD-RED models, which we'll talk about more in a moment. And then lastly, on the right, you can see XG Firewall also recently joined Amazon Web Services, which expands, of course, the cloud coverage from Azure to now include AWS, of course, enabling anyone with AWS infrastructure to protect it with an XG Firewall, and perhaps more importantly, if they're using InterceptX for server on any of their cloud server infrastructure, that will enable security heartbeat with any firewall that they use to protect that in the cloud. So overall, these new capabilities really enhance our VPN connectivity solutions, whether it's supporting the cloud, SD-WAN type of connectivity, or working from home. We really have a bunch of new capabilities here that our customers and partners can take advantage of. So let's go through each of these in a bit more detail. Starting with Sophos Connect, which, as I mentioned, is our free VPN client for Windows and Mac users to connect into their corporate network that's protected by XG. So it really allows them to connect from anywhere. It's a simple, very simple client that's easy to use, It's also easy to configure and deploy from XG for the network administrator. As I mentioned, it's available on both Windows platforms and Mac OS. It supports IPsec on both platforms. And as I mentioned, the early access program for version 2 introduces SSL connectivity on Windows devices. So as I said, it's super popular. We've had over 800,000 downloads, closing in on 1 million users of this, largely due to the global situation out there. Now, with Sophos Connect version 2 supporting both SSL and IPsec VPN technologies, many of you or partners or customers might be asking, what are the pros and cons of these two different technologies? Which one would you recommend I use? So here's some sort of high-level pros and cons. In general, IPsec is typically more efficient, but the main catch with IPsec is that it uses UDP over ports 500 and 4500, which can often result in connections using IPsec to be blocked by some third-party firewall that's in between the client and the remote firewall. So if the user has full control over their firewall or router, as you would at home or at a branch office, you can use these ports, obviously. You can open them up, and then IPsec will offer very good performance. Now, SSL VPN, on the other hand, works over port 443, which is just like any encrypted website connection. And that will present fewer obstacles to work from more varied locations, such as public Wi-Fi hotspots or hotel networks or at the airport, for example. Because if they've enabled web browsing on that network, then SSL will work. So one of the great new benefits of the Sophos Connect version 2 client is that you can now offer customers a choice. They can use IPsec, they can use SSL, all with a single client. And we would definitely encourage them to help us evaluate the new version 2 during the early access program and take advantage of the SSL VPN connectivity, especially if they're a Windows shop, and try that out. With the added flexibility it offers, it should allow their users to connect from pretty much anywhere. All right, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about the new SD-RED models. Now, some of you might be new and might be wondering, what is SD-RED? Well, SD-RED is the new name for our long-time RED or remote Ethernet device product. These are low-cost devices that you simply send out to a remote site. Could be an office, a home, an industrial site, even a vehicle. All you have to do is plug it in, power, and connect it to the internet, and it will connect back to the firewall automatically and set up a secure VPN connection. It is literally like a plug-and-play remote VPN in a box. It's been a long-time leader in the space, and to this day, actually, no one else offers anything like this. And it's attractive to customers because it's very affordable. In fact, there's no recurring licensing fee for the RED device or the SD-RED device. Once you buy it, you can use it in perpetuity. You do need the network protection license on the firewall side, but that makes it very easy to add a large number of small remote locations. It's very easy to set up, as I mentioned. You just note the serial number down of the device into your XT, send it out, and as soon as it connects back, the provisioning service will automatically establish a VPN connection between the remote device and your XG firewall. So literally anyone can do it. You don't need a network engineer at the remote site to get this set up. Now, you might be surprised in some of the applications for it. These are all the types of things that have SD-RED today. They're used to really network all kinds of things. We have payment processing on public system buses, as you can see at the top. First responders use it in some jurisdictions to connect back to the command and control center. It's on cruise ships. It's protecting borders with by connecting CCTV cameras to monitoring stations. It's doing monitoring and control for wind farms and construction sites. And you probably don't even know what this is. I didn't either. but that's a biogas dome and it needs monitoring and control, and SD-RED's being used to securely connect that back to a command center. So lots of unique and interesting applications for these things. And so you might be wondering, why did we change the name of our long time and very successful RED or remote Ethernet device products to SD-RED? You know, why SD? Well, as you may have noticed, the whole SD-WAN space has just exploded in buzz recently. It's, you know, it's all rainbows and unicorns. If you, I'm sure if you attend an Oprah Winfrey show, you might get an SD-WAN. Everyone gets an SD-WAN. You know, it's the ultimate way to extend your virtual network over the internet to branch offices and remote locations. So we really wanted to capitalize on some of the attention that SD-WAN is getting and draw attention to the fact that RED has been a long time leader in what is effectively now the SD-WAN space. And we feel it wasn't getting the credit it was due, and decided to change the name to SD-RED to capitalize on that buzz and get it so that when someone comes to Sophos, maybe a partner or even a customer, and sees our SD-RED portfolio, they're not going to wonder, what is this thing? Hopefully the name now is pretty obvious that this is something to do with SD-WAN edge devices, which is exactly what it is. Now, what's cool about the new models is really the connectivity and modularity that enables them to fit into a lot more unique environments more elegantly. You can now connect them with Ethernet or fiber, cellular, or Wi-Fi, of course, all with the same device. Very flexible, modular, with the integrated wireless module, as you can see here on both devices, both of the new models. It really makes this pretty flexible in how it can be used. They use the same wireless models or modules for Wi-Fi or LTE that the XG and SG models, 125 and 135, use. So they're interchangeable between the desktop models and the RED devices, or SD-RED devices. And the new models also offer a massive performance increase over the legacy units. So they're suitable for more, bandwidth intensive environments. They also offer dual power supply options for added business continuity, which is great. And just a note at the bottom, what minimum firmware requirements are needed for the new models. So if you want to take advantage of these, you'll need to be running version 17.5 MR11 or later, and V18 MR1, which was just released last week. And SGUTM requires 9.7 MR3. And they come with a 5-year warranty, which is pretty awesome. Now, one of the top questions I get from sales folks, partners about RED lately, especially with the more drive to work remotely, is when should I recommend an SD-RED device versus a small XG firewall appliance? And that's a very good question. And it really depends on how you want the remote site to connect to the internet. And I'm sure all the SEs in the audience will agree with me. This is the key deciding factor. Does the remote site need a direct connection to the internet? Or will the remote site, as you can see on the right, just connect straight to the main office through VPN and then access the internet from there? In effect, backhauling internet destined traffic through the main office. This is sort of the key decision point, because from here, you're basically deciding, do I need a split tunnel or a dedicated VPN only? Now, if the device connects to the internet with a split tunnel, there's still one more question you really need to ask, and that is it necessary to enforce policy or secure this direct connection to the internet? And so if you need to secure it, the choice is obvious. You need an XG firewall at the remote site. Since the SD-RED device itself does not have any firewalling or security features built into it for that split tunnel connection. So if that split tunnel direct connection to the internet does not require any security, maybe you're just using it to allow guest wireless access unprotected to the internet, then that's fine. The SD-RED device is perfectly suited for that. It doesn't allow you to secure that direct connection, and if you don't need that security, no problem. So of course, if the remote site does not require a direct connection to the internet at all, that's really what the SD-RED device was built for. It is built to provide a direct VPN connection back to that main office. And if that's your main requirement, then SD-RED's perfect. So in summary, XG Firewall is really ideal for split tunnel deployments where the direct internet connection requires some level of protection. Could mean it needs IPS or AV protection or web filtering for the users at that location, or app control or sandboxing. If it requires any of that stuff, you really need an XG Firewall, a small XG Firewall appliance at that remote location. But if you're sending the traffic all back through the main office over the VPN connection, or you don't need to secure that split tunnel, then SD-RED is ideal. It's low cost, it doesn't have recurring licensing associated with it, and it's perfect for those kinds of scenarios. So let's look at a couple typical scenarios. So in this scenario, we have an organization that needs to connect a variety of mobile vehicles and industrial control sites. And it might be any one of these types of examples we looked at earlier, for example. And so in this kind of situation, where you're connecting industrial control systems or remote vehicles or devices, where direct internet connectivity is not that important, and you can backhaul the traffic through the corporate HQ, then SD-RED is the ideal solution, as we already discussed. And you could recommend an SD-RED 20 for a smaller type of deployment where the bandwidth demands are minimal. And you could recommend an SD-RED 60 and maybe even added access points if they need to extend the wireless network at that location to support larger bandwidth requirements. So that's a perfect example of an SD-RED type of situation. Now let's look at retail, which is another common vertical where we're very successful. And there may be situations where SD-RED is perfect. Maybe it's a payment system, a kiosk, an ATM, or a small outlet where direct internet connectivity either isn't necessary or it doesn't need security because you're just providing guest access to the wireless access to the internet directly. In that case, SD-RED's perfect for that kind of application. However, you may find out that the retail chain has larger locations with more employees, and they actually want a direct connection to the internet from that location, and they want to provide web filtering on that connection for the employees at that site. Then you're looking at a small XG appliance, as we discussed. It could be an XG86 or anywhere up from there, obviously. So what's best, as we discussed earlier, is really going to depend on whether they need that split tunnel with direct access at the remote location, and if so, does it need security? If so, XG is the way to go. Otherwise, RED is perfect, or SD-RED, perfect. Now, finally, SD-RED can also play a role in securing home users. You may have an executive working from home or an employee who really could benefit from a dedicated VPN connection to their head office from their home location. So you could deploy an SD-RED device there, but in most cases, I think our free and simple Sophos Connect VPN client I mentioned earlier is going to be by far and away the best solution for a remote home worker because it's obviously free and it will run directly on their device, laptop, or Windows or Mac device. So that's perfect for them. Now, what model to recommend when? So with SD-RED, you have two choices with our new models. The SD-RED 20 for low bandwidth needs, really up to about 250 megabits per second of throughput, or the SD-RED 60, which supports higher bandwidth up to 850 megabits per second, which is really great. And otherwise, they offer very similar features, with the SD-RED 60 offering a couple of added ports. But both include the optional wireless module, which is going to be key for many, or fiber connectivity via the SFP port. XG firewall options, I'm sure you're all familiar with. Of course, start at the XG86 and go up from there. And you know, these two are similarly priced. So again, it will come down to what the requirements are in terms of security on a split tunnel as to which device makes the most sense. But an XG86 does cost or start about the same pricing as an SD-RED 20. So keep that in mind. It's not, it shouldn't come down to whether pricing is the most important factor. It should be what are the requirements on that split tunnel. And here in blue, you can see the licenses that are required. So if the customer is managing SD-RED devices, they need network protection on the XG firewall. That subscription is required. But the SD-RED devices themselves do not require a license. As I mentioned, that is what makes them very attractive for large numbers of remote site locations, because it does make it over the long run much more affordable to deploy RED because of that. If you want to use any of our site-to-site VPN technologies, which I'm going to get into in a minute, you need nothing other than the base license on the XG firewall. All of the site-to-site VPN technologies included in the base license. And then if you want to do remote zero-touch deployment of XG now, which is possible, similar to how you can do zero-touch on REDs, that capability in Sophos Central Management does require the network protection subscription on XG as well. Which is a very handy feature, being able to deploy an XG with zero touch to a remote location. All right, let's talk about site-to-site VPN, which is another important aspect. And it builds on what we were just talking about with RED devices, especially if you're deploying another small XG firewall to a remote location, then you're going to set up a site-to-site VPN. So you have a few choices here. XG Firewall supports 3 major site-to-site VPN technologies. You can use our SD-RED tunnels, you can use IPsec tunnels, or SSL and TLS tunnels. And again, these are for interconnecting firewalls together. So you've got a remote site, it's got an XG86, and you are connecting it back to your XG450 at your head office. What VPN technology are you going to use? Well, here lays out the pros and cons of each of these site-to-site VPN technologies. And with SD-RED, that's unique to Sophos. It is very simple to set up. It is actually very robust. It tolerates really high latency networks and poor internet connections much better than most other types of VPN connections. So it's perfect for things where the internet connection may be dodgy, or say on ships where it's high latency over satellite. And it has been known to punch through nation state firewalls, as many of you know, which is fabulous. It's not a protocol that, of course, nation state firewalls are looking for, so it tends to punch through quite nicely, enabling remote locations in other countries to be connected effectively. Now, if you want a more standards-based solution, that's certainly an option with IPsec or SSL or TLS. So IPsec, standards-based, great support amongst different firewall vendors. So if you have a mixed vendor environment, you want to connect your XG firewall to another vendor's firewall, IPsec is probably the best choice. It will adapt to changes in underlying network infrastructure without doing a lot of reconfiguration. But as we talked about with the remote access client, IPsec may not work over every ISP connection. It really depends. The customer will have to check with their ISPs at both locations to make sure that that traffic is going to get forwarded and not blocked. And it's also great for a high volume of tunnel traffic if performance and high volumes are important. Now, SSL and TLS, is sort of a great fallback. It's very easy to set up as well, but it will work with more ISPs just because of the way it's designed to work. So it's a great fallback. If you can't get IPsec working with your ISP, most likely SSL will work. Now, regardless of what VPN technologies customers or partners decide to use, we make it easy to configure with XG Firewall thanks to the VPN connection or orchestration wizard. It really walks you through the necessary information you need in a step-by-step manner, which is just another example of how we're making things simpler with XG Firewall. But we're not stopping there. We're going to go further and make things dramatically simpler, even more so in the next year. So let's have a look. Now, let's face it, when you're setting up multiple VPN connections from multiple different sites, it can be a chore. If maybe you have 2 sites, not a big deal. But when you get 3, 5, 10 different sites with firewalls at each location, setting up all those VPN connections can be a real chore. And so one exciting new capability coming to Sophos Central is SD-WAN and VPN orchestration, which will effectively allow you to create full hub and spoke or mesh architectures with just a few clicks, including all the underlying access rules and configuration. So it really becomes a seamless, few click experience to set up a mesh network or hub and spoke architecture. And the other aspect is the auto deployment of remote access clients. For folks working from home or remotely, you can simply choose which users access which firewall when they connect with their VPN, and Central will deploy the client and the configuration they need automatically. So overall, this is really going to dramatically improve the time a network admin needs to spend setting up their network, orchestrating all their VPN, and rolling out their remote access to work from home users. And that's all coming this year. All right, so I'll turn it back to Alan now and see if he's come up with any questions for you. But we are making some of this stuff available to you as sales tools. Keep an eye open for a new desk aid on XG versus SD-Red and other stuff on the hub in the days ahead. Alan?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, we had one question about SSL VPN and availability for Mac computers. And that's a great question. It's one we get occasionally. There's not a lot of demand for it right now. About 3% of our user base is using Mac, but it is a priority for us. Unfortunately, I don't have a timeline, a committed timeline for a release of a Mac version of Sophos Connect that supports SSL VPN. We have a number of ways that we're trying to work on accelerating that and get it into release throughout this year, but stay tuned for that. So hopefully my answer will be that we'll have something later this year, but we're just working towards getting a commitment on that answer. Another question would be around release of Sophos Connect 2, which is coming up shortly. We had a little bit of a delay on it just because of the recent changes on XG where we added a CAPTCHA to the user portal for security reasons, and that limited one of the bulk deployment features of Sophos Connect 2. So that is being addressed in XG MR3 or V18 MR3. So I don't have a timeline. I think that's August timeframe, and our plan is to release Sophos Connect, supporting the updates that we add into XG shortly after that, a matter of weeks after that. So look for something just at the end of this summer for an update there. That's it for the moment. Any more questions?
Great. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining in. If you have any further questions, just reach out to Alan or myself directly via Teams or email. We'll be happy to help you out. But thanks, Jack, over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Alan, for presenting today. I'll just remind everyone that if you want to check out the recording afterwards, we'll be sending out a follow-up email. I'll have a link to that and the collateral from the deck, as well as being able to go on to the partner portal in the webinar section for the recording, or for our internals here at Sophos, and go right onto the Sophos Hub and get those. But with that, thank you, everyone. and we'll see you on another soft skills session.